a robocaller just got busted for cloning President Biden's voice and is getting charged $6 million for essentially everything that went down. I'm going to be covering all that in the podcast. Let's get into it. So Steve Kramer is a political consultant, and he has now been fined $6 million by the FCC for using voice AI cloning technology to essentially impersonate President Biden, do a bunch of illegal robocalls during the New Hampshire primary election. Now, the robocalls were essentially intended to trick voters by using a cloned voice to essentially, I think they gave a bunch of like false instructions not to vote in the upcoming primary. It's kind of, I don't know, this is kind of stupid. In America, we have just, I feel like, really dumb kind of political stuff that goes on. Last election, this election, I feel like I've seen a ton of stories like this. If a presidential candidate calls you pretending to be President Biden and tells you not to vote, I mean, maybe some really old people got tricked. I don't really know. I mean, I think, first of all, it's just like dumb. No one actually believes that President Biden actually called you, in my opinion. But I mean, I could be wrong. And then why he would tell you not to vote seems kind of ridiculous. But regardless of all of this, obviously it's illegal to impersonate someone, especially a president. So it's kind of interesting to see what's going down here. So Kramer, he did a collaboration with Life Corporation and a telecom company, which was called Lingo. Both of them were previously charged with illegal robocalls, but he used them to essentially execute the scheme. Now, I'm not sure if they're just kind of like one of those companies gets used because they got lax rules, or if the leadership there actually knows what's going on, so they kind of just like let things slide. I think there's probably legal cases being made for both of them, and I don't want to speculate, right? Don't sue me for accusing them. But I mean, it's probably a company that's kind of letting things slide. That's my vibe on it, but you know. So right now, the FCC's actions obviously seem a little bit severe, like $6 million. But I think what they're trying to do here is set a precedent and, you know, convince other people not to do it, not to misuse AI for voter suppression or fraud. I think they did this, like this case happened pretty quick after it was discovered and it was kind of going through. So I think with a election cycle coming up, they don't really want this to happen. And I also have heard a ton of AI companies talk about the fact that they don't want their AI tools used for like election fraud. So I think they're going to try to stay out of this as well. I'll be curious to see kind of where it goes as the election goes forward. So the FCC's actions, obviously, a lot of people said they're severe. I think they're pretty useful. But following this whole case, the FCC officially said that the use of AI-generated voices in robocalls is illegal. They said this back in February, but right now they are closing a loophole in existing laws about artificial elements in these communications, because up until now, I think politicians have been using different artificial elements. Well, that wasn't necessarily artificial voices or artificial intelligence, and so now they're closing that loophole. You're not allowed to use artificial elements, and it's got to be like an actual voice, I'm assuming, that got recorded for these like auto robocall things are something that all the political parties use, but I think they just don't want it to be a voice clone of Biden and used by his opponents. Obviously, you can see the issues here. So while the FCC, they can propose fines, they also rely on local or federal law enforcement to pursue criminal charges. Currently, there's no criminal charges that have been brought against Kramer or his collaborators. Now, I think that it's like definitely a scammy, kind of scummy thing to do. But at the end of the day, I really fail to think that it had like a massive impact having a fake President Biden call you and tell you not to vote. Pretty much Biden already had it in the bag as the Democratic nominee. So essentially, this has like no impact on anything, but I think it's probably a good case to come up and be like, look, this is not what we should be doing. And I think they want to get on this ahead of the presidential election to be like, look, no parties should actually be doing this. And the other thing is, a lot of times what you see in this, whether it comes from like the actual Biden campaign or the actual Trump campaign, who are going to be the two, like people campaigning in this next election cycle, I think it's irrelevant, because a lot of times they'll all have plausible deniability, being like, look, we didn't tell these people to do it. It's just some like rogue campaign people that were doing it. Whether it comes from them or not, I think the FCC putting down this law, just saying, look, this is not the way we're going to run things, is probably for the best. So I think that's cool. Loyen Egal, who's the chief of the FCC's Enforcement Bureau, said, quote, "We will act swiftly and decisively to ensure that bad actors cannot use U.S. telecommunications networks to facilitate the misuse of generative AI technology to interfere with elections, defraud consumers, or compromise sensitive data." Now, I'm gonna just, give my like one, I don't know, conspiracy theory or like straw man to this whole thing, which is Maybe there's some uses where this would be good. I'm trying to think. Obviously, you don't want to trick people into President Biden calling them, but maybe. So the big thing that I think might be overreach is here they're like blocking it at not just like we're going to fine you if you do it or get you in trouble, but they're blocking it at a telecommunications level, meaning the telecommunications company is in charge of it. And maybe you could see a point at like a time in the future where like some company or campaign is like trying to get a message out to people about something, and then the government is like shuts it down because like through the telecommunications networks through some sort of overreach of government. I don't know. I'm trying to see like what the downsides to this legislation would be. So, or it's not even legislation. It doesn't go through the Senate. It's a bureaucratic decision that no one voted on. But anyways, maybe there's pros and cons. I mean, obviously, I think that there's mostly big pros here, but with every piece of legislation, there's government overreach that always seems to pop up. So it'll be curious to see how that plays out in the future. And I'll keep you up to date on all of that. If you enjoyed the episode today, learned anything new, I would really, really appreciate it if you subscribe on YouTube or follow us on Apple and Spotify and leave me a review, a comment on YouTube, but a review really, really helps me to keep the channel going, find amazing guests. I know it's annoying. I hate leaving reviews for stuff, but if ever you are going to leave a review, today's the day, and I would really appreciate it. It helps the channel to grow, and I hope that you have an amazing rest of your day.